Hey, welcome back to another A&M Backstage Pass. Now in this episode, we're going to break down how I look at, review, and analyze our marketing metrics. So if you've ever wondered what numbers you should be looking at and what they mean to you and how to make decisions based on those numbers, you're absolutely going to love this episode of the Backstage Pass. So let's jump on the computer and get started. Numbers, metrics. These are at the heart of everything that we do as direct response marketers. We're in the business of psychology, communication, and arithmetic. Too many marketers get caught up in the communication aspect, the copy, the headline, or they get caught up in the psychology of it, right? What triggers to hit and what emotions to prod and the benefit statements. And they leave out one of the most critical elements of what it is that we do, and that's the numbers. That's the metrics. In this business, every single decision that I make is driven by a number. I let the numbers tell me what to do with my marketing campaigns. I let the numbers tell me when it's time to scale, as you're about to see. I let the numbers tell me when it's time to tweak a part of the campaign. And I let the numbers tell me what part of that campaign to tweak when necessary. In this business, you cannot and should not make any decisions based on assumptions or guesses. This is not a business of subjectivity. It's not a business of coming up with your greatest creative answer based on what it is that you or I think. The beauty is that this is a business of objectivity, meaning numbers are objective. They're not subjective. They're not based on my opinion or your opinion. And so you need to use your numbers to drive your decisions. So how do I think about numbers? How do I look at numbers? And what numbers do I look at? Well, first and foremost, of course, this begins with tracking all of your media buying campaigns, all of your paid traffic campaigns, and tracking those campaigns by channel and by ad. By channel, I mean by Facebook, by YouTube, by Google AdWords. And by ad, I really mean certainly by the segment, the audience that you're targeting, and the creative. What is the ad actually saying? I'll tell you that you should not be buying a single piece of traffic. You shouldn't be investing in a single piece of traffic unless you are tracking everything. If you're not tracking everything, you have no way of making objective decisions. You have no way of determining when it's time to scale a campaign or when it's time to cut back or eliminate a campaign. And so I'll tell you that we track every single media buying campaign that we publish. Now, my focus when it comes to tracking, the most important part for me, and specifically within this Backstage Pass, I want you to understand that I'm tracking paid campaigns. So I'm less concerned, certainly in this video, with tracking organic traffic and what kind of ROI we have on organic traffic and blog posts and things like that. What we're really using the bulk of our tracking for is to track our paid campaigns, because I want to understand for every dollar invested how much money we are getting back. I want to hold every dollar accountable for bringing back at least $1 along with a customer, along with leads, etc. And so tracking everything. Second, return on investment is king. And I don't just mean that ROI is the critical number, the big number. ROI is the thing that I always look at. It's the very first thing that I look at. As the leader of my company, it's really the main thing that I focus on. And as you'll see in a second, I don't get caught up in the weeds of the little analytic numbers and all the little mathematical formulas that you can play around with. I focus on return on investment because the reality is this, that return on investment is the only number that you can bank. It's the only number at the end of the day that tells you whether your campaign or my campaign is viable. At the end of the day, if I'm investing $100 and I'm getting $100 back in the form of sales and new customers and leads, Everything else, all of the other numbers, which I'm going to talk to you about in a second, are really inconsequential to me. I really don't care what the opt-in rate is. I really don't care what the sales conversion rate is. I really don't care what the order form completion rate is, what the upsell take rate is. What I care about is return on investment. Because if I'm getting 100% or more of my investment back on a paid campaign, everything else is inconsequential. I will continue to run that campaign regardless of what those other metrics are. And so you can make a tremendous amount of decisions about your campaigns, about your traffic generation, your media buying, just by looking at return on investment. So don't think that you need to get caught up in the weeds of all of these numbers to really know what's going on. At the end of the day, at a bare minimum, you need to know for every dollar invested how much comes back. So return on investment is king. 3, you only use optimization metrics, which I'm going to detail for you in just a second, for enhancing and fixing a campaign. Let me say that again. You only use what are called optimization metrics for enhancing or fixing or optimizing or improving a campaign. You don't use optimization metrics to determine the viability of your marketing funnel. You don't use optimization metrics to determine whether you should scale a campaign, whether you should invest more in that campaign, or whether you should cut back. So what are optimization metrics? Well, first and foremost, opt-in rate. Opt-in rate is an optimization metric. Opt-in rate is a metric that you use to improve the performance of a campaign. You don't use opt-in rate to determine the viability of a campaign or whether you're going to spend more or spend less. You simply use it as a way to identify how well that first piece, if you're using a lead gen page, is working in your campaign. The reality is that you could have a 50, 60, 70% opt-in rate and be losing money every single day, right? You could have a 50, 60, 70% opt-in rate and be making 0 sales. And if you're making 0 sales, regardless of whether you have a 50, 60, 70% opt-in rate, right? We know that that campaign is not viable. You use opt-in rate to determine how well that first step is performing and then work on improving it. Second thing that I would say as it relates to this, and it goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway, is that if you're not monitoring and measuring the opt-in rate of the lead gen pages that you're using, well, then you have no objective way of knowing when you make an improvement or when you change the headline, when you run a test, how well, how much better or how much worse that test, that change, that tweak is performing. And so you need to know opt-in rate in order to be able to optimize how your campaign is performing. Next is sales conversion rate. You know, whether you have a 1% sales conversion rate or a 10% sales conversion rate, at the end of the day, that still does not tell you whether your campaign is viable or not. What it tells you is how well that step in your marketing campaign is performing. Again, you could have a 10% sales conversion rate and be losing money, right? Be getting clobbered. You could also have a 1% sales conversion rate and be rocking the house, right? You could be breaking even. You could be doubling your ad spend in terms of sales dollars. And so what we use sales conversion rate for is to determine how well the sales page, the marketing page is performing. And then we use that, we monitor that, we continue to measure that as we run tests. Next, like I said earlier, order form completion rate. This means what percentage of people that are hitting your order form are actually completing the order form. Now, for most marketers, this number is a lot lower than they realize. It's not uncommon to see a 20% order form completion rate, meaning that 8 out of 10 people are hitting the order form and bailing. Like I said, this is not a number that tells you the viability of your campaign. Does not matter what your order form completion rate is. If you have a positive ROI or you're at break even, I would continue to run that campaign. I'll come back in a second and I'll tell you how we use these optimization metrics to improve the performance, but I just want to hammer it home that these are nothing more than metrics used to optimize a campaign. Same thing with upsell take rate. What percentage of your new buyers, your new customers are taking advantage of your upsell? And certainly something like video sales letter consumption, meaning what percentage of people are making it through, call it 100% of your video sales letter. Is the number 100%? Is it 20%? Is it 50%? Right? Because regardless of what your opt-in rate is, sales conversion rate, order form completion rate, upsell take rate, video sales letter consumption rate, all of these numbers are there just to help you improve the performance, right? And so when you are looking to improve the performance of your campaign, which we'll talk about what numbers I look at in just a second to do that, that's when you go in and you identify which one of these numbers is performing the worst, which one of these steps or stages in your campaign is performing worst. You look at the different stages of your marketing campaign. You look at the different steps. You look at your lead gen page. You look at your marketing and sales page. You look at your order form. You look at your upsell. And you use these optimization metrics to identify the constraint in the campaign. Which one of these steps is performing the worst? Which one of these steps, if you improved it, would have the biggest impact on the success of your marketing campaign, the ROI of your marketing campaign. Well, once you've identified which one of the steps, then we begin to test new elements. We begin to test one element at a time. We test a headline, right? We test the idea. We test the call to action, right? We test these different big elements, these elements that scream, not whisper. And we use this number as a way to know whether our new addition improved it, made it worse, or didn't change it. Now, I only scale a campaign beyond what's called a minimum viable funnel. That's what MVF stands for, minimum viable funnel, when I achieve 60% or more return on investment. What does that mean? Well, first and foremost, when I create a new campaign, all new campaigns get tested as a minimum viable funnel first. It gets tested as a minimum viable funnel first. And when I say tested, I mean, and I'm going to break down what a minimum viable funnel is in just a second, but I test it with traffic and I'm looking for 60 cents or more on the dollar returned to me. That's all I am looking for. I take every new campaign and test it out in the wild as a minimum viable funnel first to save time, to eliminate risk, to test the core elements of the campaign first, and I look for 60% or more return on investment. I'll explain to you what I do if we don't get 60% and what I do if we do get 60% or more in just a second. First, let's break down what is a minimum viable funnel. So a minimum viable funnel is typically these four elements. First, it's an opt-in page, right? So this is the very first step in your marketing campaign. It's the very first stage in your marketing campaign. The next piece is the marketing and sales page. This might be the page that contains your video sales letter, or long form sales letter, or short form sales letter. This is the page that does the marketing and presents the offer. Next, we've got the order form page. This is so somebody can give you their credit card information and press submit. And then finally, we have a thank you page. When I roll out a new campaign, I roll it out as a minimum viable funnel with these elements right here. I don't roll it out with an upsell or downsell or add-on offer sequence. I don't roll it out with an email follow-up sequence. I don't roll it out with any focus on the back end or anything like that. I roll out all new campaigns as a minimum viable funnel because I want to put to the test the core elements behind a marketing funnel first before I invest any other time. I want to make sure that the idea behind the marketing campaign resonates with the market. I want to make sure that the lead, the headline, the first 350, 800 words, like the the gist, the core, the promise of the idea resonates. I want to make sure that I've got a solid marketing argument, right? I want to make sure that I have a rock solid offer in place. And it's these elements, a minimum viable funnel, that allows me and us, you, to do that. And so let's talk about that return on investment. So we take that minimum viable funnel with those 4 different elements. We roll it out into the marketplace. We drive enough people into the campaign to get statistical validity. For us, that is usually a minimum of 100 people. And so let me stress something. Regardless of what it is that your cost per click may be, right? Regardless of what it is that you are paying for a visitor, because that's going to be different for different markets, different niches, different products, etc. We drive 100 people. So the question that I'm asked all the time when it comes to testing a minimum viable funnel is, well, how much money should I invest? Well, I can't give you that answer because every market is different. If you're paying $1 per visitor, well, then you're going to need to invest $100 to test this. If you're paying 50 cents per visitor, well, then you only need to invest $50 to put this to the test. If it costs you $2 per visitor, well, then you're going to have to invest $200 to reach that minimum of 100 people into your campaign in order to understand what is going on. Now, what do we do if we're below 60%? Well, if we're below 60%, we do not scale the campaign. We don't increase our budget. We don't try to drive more traffic. We go back to the engineering stage. Here is where, if we are below 60%, meaning for every dollar we invest, we only get back 50 cents or 55 cents or 40 cents or 30 cents, whatever it may be, we go back to the engineering stage, and that's when I look at the optimization numbers. I'll pull up the optimization numbers for the lead gen page. I'll look at opt-in rate. I'll look at sales conversion rate. I'll look at the order form completion rate. I'll look at those optimization metrics. I'll see which one is the lowest, which one, if I improved, would have the best impact or the largest impact on our performance. And then I will go and I will tweak it. I'll set up a new test, and then we'll run this minimum viable funnel again, right? And so when below 60%, you use the optimization metrics to run a test. You put it out in the wild again. And once you get above 60% return on investment, that's when you go to the enhanced stage. Now, the enhanced stage, and I'm referring to the E5 customer acquisition marketing protocol, the E5 method. But in a nutshell, if you haven't gone through the E5 Camp Masterclass, enhancing is where you turn the minimum viable funnel into a full-blown marketing campaign. This is where you add in your follow-up, all of the different follow-ups. This is where you add in the upsell, downsell, add-on offer sequences. This is where you add in all of the transaction maximization elements, the things like a bump offer, the second chance offer sequence, etc. So here, above 60%, with a minimum viable funnel, 60% ROI, you are enhancing it and turning it into a full-blown funnel. Once you've turned it into a full-blown funnel, the next thing that I do, and this is so important, this is so critical, is I determine my maximum allowable acquisition cost. What is that? That's the maximum amount of money that I am willing to invest to get a new customer. What is it that I am willing to spend? Am I willing to spend $50 to get a new customer? Right? Am I willing, meaning if I spend $100 on traffic, that means I need to get at least 2 customers, right? What is my maximum allowable acquisition cost? You have to know that number. You should always know that number when you begin to scale a traffic campaign, when you begin to increase your budget, because it's going to tell you how much you can afford to spend to get a new customer. Now, at first, when you are just starting out, right? When your business hasn't quite matured yet, when you don't have a substantial amount of excess cash flow, when maybe you don't know your long-term numbers like lifetime customer value, I recommend that you start at break even. It's the safest place to begin, and this is really where often I actually begin when we're scaling a new campaign, when we're starting to scale a new campaign. What do I mean by break even? I mean that however much it is that a customer is worth to you, whatever it is that the average customer spends with you when they're going through this campaign, this new campaign that you're now scaling, whatever it is that the average customer spends with you is the most amount of money that you can afford to spend to get a customer. Meaning the average transaction amount, the average amount that a customer spends with you is your maximum allowable acquisition cost. That means that once you've turned your minimum viable funnel into a full-blown funnel through enhancing, you'll start to see that, okay, the average sale, the average customer is worth X. Let's call it $50. Some may be worth less, some may be worth more, right? Some may only buy your core product, some may buy your core product and your upsell. If you have more than one upsell or add-on offer or cross-sell, some might buy all of them, right? But you'll find an average. You'll see what the average customer is worth. If that average customer, for example, is worth $50, then the maximum allowable acquisition cost for you is $50. If you invest $50 to get a new customer who spends $50 with you, you are operating at break even. And so you understand, despite what a lot of entrepreneurs and marketers may think or may have been led to believe, break even is a huge victory, because what it means is that you are acquiring customers and growing your database for free. If you're breaking even, if every time you're spending $100 or $200 or $300, and I really don't even say spend, I really say invest, what that means is that your bank account is no less today than it was 3 days ago. If you invest $100, $200, $300, and you get that $100, $200, $300 back in the form of new customers and sales plus leads, you are no worse off than you were 3 days ago financially. But now you've got customers, you've got buyers that you can put into your back end, and you've got leads that you can follow up with ongoing and present additional offers. This is where I recommend that all of my new clients and students begin, because it's the safest place to operate. Now, specifically, what we're talking about here is front-end acquisition. It goes without saying that we're talking about using this break-even number on a front-end customer acquiring campaign. We're not talking about the back end. We're not talking about if you do direct mail or something like that to your existing customers. We're talking about the front end here. Now, eventually, you may want to get more aggressive. You may want to go to the third level of acquisition aggression. I strive to get to this third level as quickly as possible with our campaigns, because it's the third level of acquisition aggression where you will grow the fastest. And that third level of acquisition aggression is when you use cash flow and lifetime customer value to go negative. Going negative means you spend more money to acquire a new customer than what the average customer is worth to you today. Meaning, if the average customer is worth $50 to you, you may be willing to go negative and spend $60 today to get a customer. Meaning you spend 60, you get a customer today that spends 50 with you, you went negative by $10. Now, why would anybody in their right mind do that? Well, you would do that when you understand what a customer is worth to you over the life of their patronage with your business. Meaning that if a customer on average spends $50 with you today, and then over the next 6 months, on average, they spend another $500, well, going negative by $10 makes complete sense, because you're in essence investing $10 out of your pocket to get something that is worth an additional $500 for you over the coming months. Now, here's the key. You can only go and should only go negative when you know what your lifetime customer value is, when you know what the average of value lifetime of the typical customer is for you, and you have the cash flow to float. What do I mean by the cash flow to float? I mean that can you afford, in this example, to spend $10 today, to go out of pocket by $10 to get a customer? What would happen if today we ramped up your marketing campaign and you got 100 new customers today? If you got 100 new customers and every customer was costing you right now, today, at $10 to acquire, that means out of your bank account today went $1,000. And if you do that every day, right, can you afford the $1,000 today, the $1,000 tomorrow, the $1,000 the next day, until you recoup the lifetime value over the coming weeks and months? Right? So you only go negative when you know what a customer is worth to you over the life of their patronage on average. And again, we're talking about averages. That's what you use in this business. Averages, right? So what is the average customer worth over the life of their patronage with you? And just as a side note, that number should go up. That number should constantly be increasing. As you're rolling out new back-end offers, as you're presenting your customers with more and more opportunities to get value from you through new products and services, etc., your lifetime value should increase, right? If it's going down, that is a very bad sign in your business. So really, for the majority of businesses, what your lifetime value is today is going to be the lowest it will ever be going forward. You have to know what that number is, and you have to have the cash to float. When you know what the number is and you have the cash that you can float, your aim should be to be as aggressive as possible. Again, you decide what is the maximum allowable acquisition cost. What is the maximum amount of money that you are willing to invest to get a new customer? For me, I am constantly trying to push that number. I want that number to be as high as possible. I want the maximum amount of money that I can invest into a campaign to get a customer to be as high as possible. The higher that number is, the greater the amount is that I can invest to get a new customer, the more I can dominate any market, because I can outspend, out-invest my competitors when it comes to customer acquisition. I can use platforms and channels that others can't because I'm willing to spend more. I'm willing to pay the excessive fees, if you will, click-through, cost per click fees and whatnot in order to get a visitor, right? And so you're constantly looking to spend more. I'm constantly looking to push that maximum allowable acquisition cost. I constantly see, how can we increase it? Can we increase it today? If we increase the average amount of money that a customer spends with us on the front end through this campaign or a campaign, and we increase lifetime customer value, that gives me the ability to spend more. That gives me the ability to raise the maximum amount of money that I am willing to spend to get a customer, and I do. I'll tell you before we go on to the last point that I want to make for you, that the overwhelming majority of entrepreneurs and marketers are not aggressive enough when it comes to what they are willing to invest to get a customer. Too many marketers are hampering their growth. They're stifling their growth. They're slowing their growth because they're not willing to invest more to get a customer. You want to do the opposite. The final thing, totally in line with everything that I just shared with you, is you want to use your metrics like an investor. And I've said this before in numerous trainings, numerous times, that when it comes to my numbers and it comes to these metrics that I've just shared with you in this Backstage Pass, I think like an investor. I'm investing in the acquisition of assets. Those assets are customers. Those assets have a value today. That is, what is the average front-end transaction value, the average amount of money that they spend with me today, and that asset, those customers, have a value to me over the coming weeks and over the coming months. That's lifetime customer value. And so what I am willing to spend, if you will, to get a customer is looked at and viewed through the lens of an investor. I'm investing in an asset. That asset is worth $50 today. That asset, for example, might be worth $500 over the next 90 days. Well, what would I be willing to invest today to get an asset that's going to put $50 in my pocket today and then another $500 over the coming 90 days, right? When you think about your numbers and you look at your numbers and you treat your numbers like an investor instead of like an expense, instead of like, right, like sales, expense, profit, right? You start to see that if you're willing to delay your profit, if you're willing to delay your profit and even go negative, even make an investment out of pocket, you can grow your business very, very, very quickly. And that's how the biggest, best, and baddest direct response marketers on the planet think about their numbers. And so, action item to wrap up this Backstage Pass. So what specifically, now that you understand how I view metrics and how I think about these metrics and what metrics I look at, what specifically are you now going to do differently with your metrics? What metrics are you going to look at now? What metrics aren't you going to look at? What specifically are you going to do differently now with your metrics? And so there you go. I'll talk to you next month in next month's Backstage Pass.